Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Michelle, for the very kind introduction. I feel very overwhelmed and feel deeply honored to be invited to give this presentation. I come from Vietnam, a country in Southeast Asia, 9-hour flight from here, but still in this region. And Vietnam is a country known for an epidemic of HIV that's driven by injecting drug use. We are also a country known as one with the compulsory drug treatment. But over the last 10 years, as Michelle mentioned, we have seen a lot of progress in the country. So today I would like to share with you the journey of my country and then my reflection of that journey into the global drug policy and harm reduction. I would like to bring you back to Vietnam. In 2003, it was time that I started to work in harm reduction. In 2003, in Vietnam, on the screen, you see the picture of one of the many billboards that line up the street of Vietnam. On the top, the red letter say drugs, and the blue letter below say stay away. And in the middle, you can see the image of people who use drugs. You see the needle, you see the word AIDS, you see the snake, you see the handcuff. So drug use in the country has been associated with HIV, with criminal, with evil. It was a very dark day, and I am a mother. In 2003, my son was 12 years old, start to be a teenager. As any mother, I am fearful of the thought that one day one of my children may use illicit drugs. Not because of the fact that he used drugs that scare me, but because his drug use would make him a target of the legal system. In most parts of the world, all sorts of drugs are made illicit. And if being caught even once, even for the first time, would subject my son to sanction. Being caught using with friends would make him a criminal for organizing drug use. Being caught with adults with him would make him a criminal for storing drugs. And the fear list didn't stop there. He may get HIV or hepatitis. In 2003, in my country, 1 in 3 injecting drug users get HIV. In some places, the HIV prevalence among injecting drug users even higher. I visited a village near Hạ Long Bay. Vietnam is known for Hạ Long Bay, so one of the World Heritage. In that village, if you go to the cemetery, you see many graves of young people. The local people told me that in the early 2000s, every day they have a funeral of people with white flower. In my country, white flower are used in the funeral of the people who are not married. My son may become dependent of drug after using it. He may have an overdose and not being rescued. There's a study in my country show that about 1/4 of drug users who die of overdose. His life may be totally ruined, and so my family. As an ordinary mother, I was worried. As a doctor, I'm concerned that even my medical profession would not even be helpful for my own son if this happened to him. But my perspective changed when I met an Australian person. I'm sorry that he's not here today, and I didn't tell him that I'm going to talk about him. But anyway, I hold very dear Alex Vodak in my heart because he's the one who inspired me to work in harm reduction. I learned from him that harm reduction is a pragmatic approach to keep people healthy, alive, and be a part of the community. So any intervention that serves this purpose would deserve to be called harm reduction. It could be needle and syringe, it could be opioid substitution therapy, it could be community development, it could be legal reform, it could be anything. And today we even talk about ARV treatment for people who inject drugs as a prevention. I also learned that harm reduction effectively prevents transmission of HIV and hepatitis and other bloodborne disease. I was overwhelmed, I was so impressed, I was shocked to learn that in Australia in 2003, only 2% of injecting drug users was living with HIV. It was unimaginable for me at the time, seeing so many people in Vietnam getting HIV through injection. I learned from him also that people who have a drug dependence can still live a healthy life. In Vietnam, we used to think that once you are dependent of drug, your life's finished. You can never go back, you can never live a healthy life. And I also learned from Alex, and today he's a passionate advocate of law and policy reform on drug issue, that law and social perception are very, very critical. And I learned that more and more over the year. But Alex also teach me that law and social perception are made by human. It was human who made the law, so human can change law too. I have gone through from feeling hopeless and important to feeling more empowered and more competent. And so is my country. I want to share this slide with you because it shows our journey. Before 2003, harm reduction was illegal in Vietnam. Distribution of needles is considered as helping drug use. It was written in the Constitution that people who have a drug problem were subject to compulsory treatment. In 2002, when we start to have a Global Fund first round, the Global Fund first round, the first significant amount of funding for HIV in a country that the epidemic driven by injecting drug use have no dollar, put no money for harm reduction, just because it was impossible to distribute needle by then. In 2003, the British government supported our country with one of the very big harm reduction projects. It was not called harm reduction because the term was not even acceptable in Vietnam by then. It was called HIV prevention. In that HIV prevention primarily target the key population. In the first year, they could only distribute less than 100,000 needles for 200,000 injecting drug users. But since 2003, there's a lot of effort to advocate to change the law in the country. In 2004, by the way, Alex came to Vietnam in 2003 to give a presentation to the Communist Party leaders and other government officials. And we start to see change with his support and many other support that our country received. In 2004, our first national HIV strategy set the target for harm reduction, 100% clean needle, and things start to change. In 2006, our National Assembly passed the HIV law, and in that law, harm reduction including opioid substitution therapy, needle and syringe, and condom distribution, as well as peer education, was legalized. And you see more change afterward. You see the number of clean needle distributed increase significantly, rapidly, and for oral substitution therapy, we went from none to Today's 18,000 people, and the government set the target of having 80,000 people on methadone by the end of next year. Together with the change in harm reduction and in the policy for harm reduction, we see more change in the way that the country dealing with drug issue and treat drug user. Drug use was decriminalized in 2009 with the revision of Penal Code. And just last year, our National Assembly, our country revised the Constitution, and the article in the Constitution that made drug treatment compulsory was removed. I'm happy and I'm proud that Vietnam have joined many other countries in legalizing harm reduction, in implementing and scaling up harm reduction. I remember in 2003, when Alex came to Vietnam to give a presentation, the number of the places that implement needle and syringe and OST was counted by city. He mentioned 40 cities, 20 cities. Now it is counted by country. And we see great change in the global harm reduction program and policy in last decade. And it is great, but it's not enough. We know that there are countries that have a lot of injection users, have a huge epidemic among injecting drug users, is not implement harm reduction. Russia is one example. But I hope to see change. I believe that the Russian government and other governments will soon to see the benefit of harm reduction. And in the next conference, we will see more countries implementing harm reduction and make harm reduction possible. But sometimes, as the people who work on HIV and harm reduction, we tend to forget that HIV is not the only killer of people who inject drugs. People who inject drugs are globally 14 times more likely to die than people of the same age group. They may be die of overdose. Drug overdose, according to UNODC, kill about 500 people every day, every single day. So during the time of this conference, thousands of people may have died of drug overdose. But the good news is that opioid overdose can be reversed, especially with naloxone. And I salute WHO and thanks to WHO to take the leadership on this by recommending distribution of naloxone to the lay people, to the first responder to rescue opioid overdose. WHO is developing the guideline, and I'm really hoping that the country will take this guideline and implement this guideline. Then we can save thousands, 100,000 and millions of lives. I come from a country that is known for war. I come from a military family. My father is a general in the military, so is my big brother. We know war very well. But do you know that in the 20 years of the Vietnam War, we lost around 2 million people? That's a lot. But if you think about it, 20 years, 2 million people, it is 100,000 people a year. It's just half of the number of people die of drug overdose in the 21st century. So drug is killing a lot more people than war. And we can change that with naloxone, with overdose rescue program. Hepatitis C is known as another very, very common problem among injecting drug users. At least 60 to 80% of people who inject drugs are infected with hepatitis C. Most of the people who inject drugs in Vietnam that I know are living with hepatitis C. this can be a very deadly killer. But the good news also that we have new Hep C treatment, and Hep C treatment is effective. But the price of medicine is prohibited. It is not the Hep C that kills people, it's the price of medicine that kills people. But we have good news too, that medicine don't have to be that expensive. People study it carefully and they discover that the new drug that treats Hep C effectively would cost only less than $200 to produce. So there's opportunity to reduce significantly the cost of Hep C treatment so that more people can have access to treatment and more people can be cured by the treatment. And we also learned that Hep C treatment in combination with needle and syringe program and the opioid substitution therapy can reduce further the burden of hepatitis C. TB is a very common problem among people who inject drugs, but is often overlooked. We all know that TB is a leading cause of death among people living with HIV, and many of them are people who inject drugs. And regardless of HIV status, people who use drugs can be many more times likely to get TB than others. And once they get TB, they are more likely than others to die. It's not because the treatment is not effective to them, because they don't have access to treatment, or they cannot stand at the same time a drug dependent and a TB treatment. So TB treatment needs to go hand in hand with opioid substitution therapy and HIV treatment. We can combat TB among people who inject drugs. We need to work more on this. So I'm happy to see so many people working on TB today, but today we still talk a lot. We talk a lot about TB, HIV, and that's great, but we also need to talk about TB among people who inject drugs. Now, I'm coming to a sensitive issue. According to Human Rights Watch report, in the East and Southeast Asia, there's about 235,000 people who use drugs in around 1,000 compulsory detention and rehabilitation centers. Being a part of the country, living in the country all my life, I could see that compulsory treatment, to many people, it comes with a good intention. It is to help people who use drugs, to help the family, to help the society. But unfortunately, good intention is not always matched with good intervention. Compulsory treatment, as stated by the 12 UN agencies, is not effective as the violating of human rights, and the UN called to the state, to the government, to close the center and to implement voluntary, evidence-informed and rights-based health and social services in the community. We had last few years had been very difficult for our country because we are subject to a lot of criticism. But I am pleased to share with you that our government is responding very positively to this issue. In 2012, our National Assembly passed the Administrative Sanction Law, and according to the law, there certain conditions have to be met before a drug user is sent to court to judge if he or she need to be sent to a compulsory rehabilitation. It was not like that before. Before, it's like local authorities sign a paper and then you go to the center. So there's a progress here. Also, just last year, our government passed a renovation plan on drug treatment with the ambition of renovating, reforming the drug treatment system in the country to scale down the compulsory treatment from 63% of people who use drugs to be sent to rehabilitation center in 2003 to 6% by 2020. It is not perfect, but we are making progress. And we need help because criticism is not enough. Drug treatment is a difficult issue. It's not easy. And on the one hand, we see that the comment, criticism is necessary, but it's not enough. We need a lot of support to build an effective community-based voluntary treatment for drug dependent. It is for the country, but firstly, it is for people who have a drug problem. So I call upon the UN who request the country to reform the drug treatment system to go to the community-based voluntary treatment. To support us, I would like to call upon everyone to help us to have an effective community-based voluntary drug treatment for people who are struggling in my country and in other countries. Oftentimes, I was frustrated when I heard people only focusing on the vein of drug user. Drug users are people. What they do with their vein are divided by what is in their heart, by what is in their brain. So we need to work with people who use drugs as a whole human being and not just focus on their vein, not just the needle or the drug, but it's the people we are working with. They are the people who need to feel empowered and confident and self-worthy. They need friends with a positive norm and support. They need a positive and enable policy and program environment to live in. So we need to work at all these levels, not just their vein. In last few years, we see not only policy change in the country of Vietnam, but we also see a strong development movement of the people who use drugs in my country. I'm happy to share with you that 2 years ago, the Vietnam network of people who use drugs was created, and it's growing very, very fast. And today, the drug user representatives are in different forums, discussing with the government, discussing with donors, give their input to policy and program. And it's not only that the government have to listen to them. The government now appreciate their input and their contribution and recognize their role in addressing the problem associated with drug in the country. And we have a scientific evaluation of drug user organization by a team from Yale University. And the evaluation showed that organization of drug user can help to improve the quality of life, the self-efficacy, as well as addressing the problem associated with drug use as the use of new needle or the use of drugs. At the end of the day, government, donor, multilateral agency, or even NGO may change their priority. They may focus on something else than HIV or drug issue. But the people who use drugs are the very people who have to live with drugs. So community system strengthening the organization, the network of drug users is very critical if we want to have a sustainable response to drug problem. But we are facing a crisis in harm reduction. People used to call it a financial crisis. I would call it a finance and orientation crisis. Treatment as a prevention came out as a wonderful news, but it has a flip side. It makes people think that prevention is no longer needed, which is not true. In this conference, we talk about infection of hepatitis C, but also we talk about the reinfection of hepatitis C. If people are cured for hepatitis C, but the needle are not available and they have to share the needle, they may get hepatitis C again. But also the prevention program actually is the one who brings drug user to the treatment program. So we cannot medicalize the HIV response. We cannot medicalize harm reduction. We need to do both harm reduction and treatment. At the same time, the global new funding model came out as a very, very smart approach. But with the limited funding, the country now, the stakeholders in the country are put in the situation, have to compete with each other for funding. So which prevention, which intervention would get priority? It is a problem. And the third problem is the funding to middle-income countries are being reduced. And we know that middle-income countries are the place that majority of drug users are living. We need probably about $2.3 billion for harm reduction, but international donors who support HIV only fund 160 million, only 7% of that. And the excuse is always that we don't have money. But it's not true. There's hundreds of billions of dollars spent on drug enforcement. I put my medical practice on hold to work on policy advocacy because I came to realization that doctors try our best to save lives one by one, but a bad policy can kill massive, and good policy can save millions. This is the call for action from the drug user community, and I joined the call, and I would like you to join the call. Stop criminalizing drug user, access to hepatitis C, hepatitis B, HIV diagnosis and treatment now, implement harm reduction now, and I would like to call also fully fund harm reduction and critical enabler. And lastly, thank you to the people who encouraged me and helped me with this presentation. This is a picture of the women who injecting drug user in Vietnam. Thank you very much.